Welcome back to the cabin, guys. Today I'm here on another beautiful spring day. I think it's 2 days or 3 days past the first day of spring. And I wanted to get up here and really get going with the maple tapping. Just gonna head down now to the maple trees and scope things out. The snow is nice and crunchy, so it's really easy to walk on top of the snow. Like there's no need for snowshoes today. So as you guys remember, I flagged the maple trees early on, basically in the fall, end of the summer there. So this is the time to tap the trees. Right now it is basically, well, it's just slightly above zero. So over the next week, it's going to be rising, temperatures will be rising during the day to 5 degrees Celsius and about -4 at night. So that's perfect time for the sap to be running. As you can see here, the snow is starting to melt away from the base of the tree, and the sun is hitting this maple just perfectly. I've got a bunch through the woods here that are flagged off. And this year my plan is to just use some tubing and some buckets. You know, when I've been doing the backyard tapping, I've been using the traditional metal spiles and the metal pails. And now I'm going to be using just some tubing into 5-gallon pails because I won't be here for a few days. So I want to get things rolling. And then when I come back, they'll be stored in the 5-gallon pails. The sap will be. Here are my supplies. So you can see I've got several 5-gallon pails. So what I have here are 40-inch polyethylene drop lines. And sort of a very rigid kind of plastic. Normally you would use these from the spile, down from the spile attached to the tree and down to your lateral line, which is the tubing that would go through the woods and connect with a main sap line. But today we're using a different method, and all that we'll need really are the drop lines. I also brought spiles with me. So these are fast flow 5/16 plastic spiles. And those attach to the drop line. And it's advisable to do this before you go into the bush. Have a bunch of your drop lines made up. So as you can see, I've started attaching some of them to this drop line here. Now, if you were doing a really extensive tubing system, you'd also want to put in your little T connector in here that would connect all the, the tube into the lateral line. So I want to introduce you to a really good book I got at Atkinson Maple Supply. It's called The Design and Installation Maintenance of Plastic Tubing Systems for Sap Collection in Sugar Bushes. And as you can see there, it's by D. Chapesky and L.J. Statz. So this is an excellent book if you really want to get into using the tube method. I'm using the tube and bucket method. But if you want to get really extensive and use vacuum systems, things like that, some really advanced techniques, this book has it all. And here's a section in the book that talks about the method I'm using, where you have the sap line that comes straight from the tree down into the bucket. And this can be used in a lot of warmer areas here in Ontario. So I'm going to get all my stuff ready here and head out into the sugar bush here, my little miniature sugar bush, and set up a few pails. I'm not going to be tapping a lot of trees right now, because I'll be away for a few days and I just don't want to have a massive amount of sap production. But just a few pails to get into this method of tapping and see how things go for me. All right, so I'm ready to head out, and you can see behind me, I've got all my supplies in my sled. So I've got my little battery operated drill, the buckets, and the drop line with the spiles. So we've arrived at our first tree, this guy. And one thing I wanted to do is talk a bit about, tapping the trees and how do you pick a tree to tap. Well, first of all, you want to get a sugar maple or a member of the maple family. The best is a sugar maple because it will produce for you the highest amount of sugar in your make very, very sweet maple syrup. Some of the best tasting maple syrup around. So when we select our tree for tapping, we want to make sure that it is about 10 inches in diameter at minimum, and that it's healthy, that there is to be no damage to the tree that we can visibly see. Trees that have damaged bark and look like they're dying are not good candidates for tapping. So I definitely would try my best to avoid those. They may be infested with bugs and things like that and eventually die and really just not produce very good maple syrup. May not have a high volume of sap coming out of it due to lots of dead limbs and things like that. And we want to be very sort of clean about our maple spile installation for collecting the sap. So these are new spiles, but if you have spiles from last year, then I advise you sanitize them properly. A lot of good guides out there explaining how to do that. And when you go to drill the hole into the tree, I usually drill about chest height and use a very sharp bit. So the spiles that I have are called healthy spiles or healthy spouts, and they are 5/16 inches in size. So these healthy spouts are great because they produce a smaller hole that heals a lot faster, and that certainly is good for the health of the tree. You know, the smaller wound you make, the less area of entry for pathogens to get into the tree and for damage to be done to the tree that it has to attempt to heal over a period of the coming months. So I like these smaller spiles. I think they work just as effectively as the other ones, and it's just fine for my small, you know, backyard or cabin operation for maple syrup. So we want to use a really sharp, you know, drill bit. Again, here's the 5/16 drill bit. I'm going to go in at about a 10-degree angle into the tree. And we don't want to drill in terribly far. We want to go in about 1 inch or 2 inches past the sort of main thickness of the bark. So as you can see, that was really quick. I didn't have to go in very far. And sometimes you can already get some wet inner pulp of the tree kind of coming out around your drill bit there, and that can tell you that you're right into where you need to be. It is advisable to tap the trees if you're able to do so above -5 degrees Celsius. Below that, you're drilling into frozen bark, and there's more chance for you to break off chippets of bark and damage the tree further. So it's better if you can tap above 0 degrees so that you have less damage to the bark and to the tree itself. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but we're already getting some sap flow, so that is really encouraging. You can see right here, it's damp, so we're into where we need to be. And so you can just sort of gently twist in your spile. So I've got a little twist there and just a very light little tap in there. You don't want to go too crazy with the hammer because you might end up cracking your spile, or worse, injuring the tree, you know, fracturing off a bunch of the bark or something like that. So as you can see, there's already sap starting to flow down here, down this tube. It's actually already dripping out the bottom. So let's get our pails all set up. So one thing to mention is that, you know, I'm going to put 1 tap in this tree. So trees up to, you know, 10 to 17 inches should get about 1 tap per tree. And then trees between 18 inches and 24 inches, and I'm talking about diameter here, those can get no more than 2 taps. And you definitely want to spread out the taps. You do not want to stress the tree by adding, you know, more taps. Don't be greedy. There's lots of maples around, and you don't want to injure a tree permanently so that you can't enjoy it and use it in the future. So as you can see, my spout's not long enough, so what I'm going to do is I've got some little connectors, and I'm just going to actually, I brought some other polyethylene tubing. I'm going to make a little bit of an extension set to get into the pail. I have no idea where my blue lateral line is. I had a bunch of that from a few years ago when I was doing some experimenting. I can't find it, so we're just going to have to make do with some of the plastic tubing that I have. All right, so I'm a little bit short, so I've got some 30-inch drop line, and what I'm going to do is I just have a little Y connector here. I'm just going to pop this in right now, actually. And then I'm going to have to plug one of these ends so it doesn't drip everywhere. So it's pretty easy to just sort of screw them on. Connect 2 pieces of tubing if you don't have long enough. Now some people, like I said, you have that regular blue polyethylene lateral line, and that's probably the easiest actually to connect it, but I just have these drop lines left over, so I'm going to use these. And I'm just going to pop this here into the bucket. What I might do is actually I'm going to drill a little tiny hole in the side to feed the tube in. That way we can kind of close the bucket somewhat so I don't have critters getting into it. So the tubing is a bit bigger on the outside obviously than the inside, so I'm just going to get a little bit bigger drill bit here and make a hole at the top of the bucket there for the tube. All right, so that seems to work. So that's great, and you can see the sap's running nicely. So it is a fairly tight fit that I have in here, so it doesn't slip out on me. Just gonna pop the lid on. Holy man. These lids are really new and tight. There we go. Okay. You want to make sure the ground is actually pretty even where these guys go in, because you don't want them to, as things melt out, the bucket might fall over. We don't want that. What I might actually do is actually wire part of this to the tree. I just have this bad feeling being on a slope that once this melts out, it's gonna fall down. So I'm gonna go grab some wire and do that. I've got some wire here. Again, don't forget to plug this little extra port here with one of these rubber plugs, because you just don't want to lose that sap to the snow. So there you go. So you've got the two tubes connected and your little plug there. So I'm just going to wire this on to the tree. I just have a fear that it's going to just go rolling down this embankment. So I'm going to grab a bit of this thicker wire here. Hopefully I won't have to do this to too many of them. And now. Well, that sucked. I had a little piece of wire twisted up to prevent this from happening, and now it's exploded everywhere. Oh well, deal with that later. There, it's most likely to kind of go this way, and this will prevent that from happening. So just tie it here. This mess out of the way, and then what I want to do is put a bit more snow all around it to keep it nice and cold. Right, so this one is complete. So you can see where it attaches there. The nice snug fit. Goes down. Again, it was too short to meet my pail, so I have one of these little connectors here, and I plugged it. You can see this little rubber plug at the end. And then I have a little bit more of the polyethylene drop line here, so I just used a smaller length. Drilled a hole right into the pail there. And I've now packed some snow and ice around the pail. So that's hopefully going to keep things nice and cool and refrigerated till I get back in a few days. So you can see my wire exploded. I had it all kind of tied up nicely, and then that little part gave away and it exploded like a slinky. A disastrous slinky everywhere. Oh boy, I gotta fix that mess up. So once I fix that up, I'm going to head over and just keep working and putting in more taps. Okay, we're setting up the next one. I think that should be pretty good. Move this up. So remember to drill on a little 10-degree angle and no more than 1 to 2 inches into the tree past the main bark. So in this one I've already pre-drilled the hole, so I can just stuff it in. All right, there we go. All right, on we go to the next one. One thing to note when you're placing your taps, a lot of people feel that, there's a very specific side of the tree that you should tap on. And research shows that's not necessarily the case. So basically, especially if you're going to be tapping the same tree the following year, you're going to want to rotate the position of your spile. You can kind of go up the tree in a spiral-like fashion. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on the side of the tree that gets the most sun during the day. I mean, I find the spiles on that side obviously run like quicker when I've tapped in the past, but all areas of the tree will be producing sap for you. So there's no concern in terms of, you know, oh, do I have to place it, you know, predominantly where the sun hits the tree during the day or not? But that's just not practical when you're continuing to, you know, tap the maple trees year after year. So you can put the spiles on any aspect of the tree. Well, guys, I'm all done for now. I've just quickly set up about 5 pails. I just want to see how things go to start, because I've never used this method before, and because I don't live here full time, I don't want to have too many buckets collecting, because then I won't know what to do with all of them. So we're going to start with 5 pails and go from there. One nice thing about the pails is that you can certainly have a little seat on them when you're ready to have a rest and sort of lean up against the tree. So yep, that was lots of fun. I just want to sort of see how this works out this year. This is the first time I've used this method here at the cabin, and you know, that way I'll be able to capture a bit more sap than just hanging the metal pails. And you know, maybe someday in the future, maybe I'll set up a bit more of an intensive sugar bush operation. But right now, you know, as you know, if you do maple syrup production, it's very intense. Quite often, a lot of people take off a few weeks from work if they're working full time to deal with their sugar bush, because there's obviously, you get lots of sap. You have to boil it down for hours and hours. For sugar maple, you're looking at, you know, 40 parts sap to 1 part of finished maple syrup product. So you can imagine that takes a tremendous amount of time and effort. And especially, you know, if you're running just sort of a smaller operation, but, you know, I can imagine some of these larger sugar bushes, major commercial outfits, that is a lot of labor. And obviously in those situations, you have a lot of people to help you out. But just getting introduced to this, you don't need that many taps, honestly, for, you know, a very small household. You know, you'll start producing maple syrup fast and furious. Last year was the best year for maple syrup production around here. We had prolonged days where it was above 5 and below, you know, around -4, -5 at night. So they had no idea what to do with all the sap they were collecting last year. Some of it had to get dumped because there's just way too much being produced. So anyway, we'll see how things go this year. This year's a bit different. Last night, the night before, was about -18. We're actually getting to more seasonal temperatures. So we'll check back in a little while and see how these are going. For now, only 1 of the 5 taps is running, probably because it's a little bit higher up on the ridge here, and so its root systems have, you know, things have started to thaw out a little bit more for that tree. But I started feeling a little bit of damp sawdust out of some of the other trees that I was drilling into, so that's encouraging that they are they're getting ready to produce lots of sap for me. Thanks, guys, for joining me today at the cabin, getting my little maple syrup production underway for this year. The earliest I tapped actually was the end of February, and that was this year. I did a little bit of backyard tapping and made some candy, so that was quite good. The syrup was super flavorful. So that was encouraging that this year, hopefully, now that the weather has cooperated a bit more, that we'll be able to get that sap running again, just like it was with that warm up that we had there in February. All right, guys, I hope you have a great week as always. Take care.